Hi, I'm Anne-Louise Sterry, but of course you know that because you just read it on the title of this CD. It's nice to have a chance to sit and talk to you a little bit. I don't often get to do that with my audiences and tell you a little bit about myself. You might want to know some of the ways that I got to the place that I am. So I'll first tell you I was born in Hoboken, New Jersey. That's northern New Jersey, in case you didn't know, and it is the home of Frank Sinatra. And yes, my Italian family did know Frank's family, at least my grandmother did. We spent our early years there, and my father's family lived there, and my mother's family, both Italian. My father's family from the north, and my mother's family from the south of Italy. Two very different Italian traditions, really. The northern people were much quieter and calmer, more almost like German people. And the southern Italians, at least my family, and I think most southern Italians, were noisy and loud and rambunctious and flamboyant. And it was like oil and water when you think about it. In fact, the Italians have a saying, chickpea marries chickpea, garbanzo bean marries garbanzo bean. That's how you get a good crop. But in my family's case, a garbanzo bean married a chickpea, and still they got me, plus 3 more sisters and a brother, and I think my parents did okay. But being Italian was a huge part of my life. In fact, I thought that I was Italian before I knew that I was American, because we carried on all the traditions that my grandmothers had done and my great-grandmothers had done. We cooked special foods for all the holidays when all the family gathers. We still cook those special foods. In fact, we taught our kids to cook those special foods, like ravioli. We make tiny little raviolis, and we stuff them with pork and beef and spinach and cheese and eggs. Oh, it's delicious. And they're just tiny little ones, and the dough is so light, they melt in your mouth. And it takes a day to make raviolis like that for the family. When my mother used to make them and my grandmother, we used to help when we were kids, you would make raviolis all day long. And we had a special rolling pin that had little squares. And when you rolled it over the dough, it made the square marks on the dough. And then you had another little wheel. I forget what it's called. It has little like zigzags on it, kind of like you might use for pizza. And then you rolled it back and forth where the lines were to cut the raviolis. Then you carried them all upstairs to the attic. This is how old I am when you think about it. You carried all that upstairs to the attic where you laid it out on sheets that were sprinkled with flour, and you let it dry. And when it dried, which sometimes took overnight, you would cook them the next day. It was an enormous family project, but we loved doing it because all the time we were doing it with my mother and my grandmother and my aunts. We were all together talking and having a great time. Those are the kinds of things I remember about growing up in this big Italian-American family. When I was a bit older, we moved to the suburbs, but we always went back to Hoboken to visit our grandparents. One of my grandmothers, my mother's mother, she had a restaurant in Hoboken, and she made all the food herself. It was really a bar and grill, and a lot of the men from the shipyards, because Hoboken was a big steelworking shipyard place, a lot of the men from the shipyards came there for lunch and for dinner. But my grandmother, besides just serving American hamburgers and hot dogs, she made homemade sausage. She made homemade pasta. She made homemade raviolis, the big cheese ones and the little ones. She made all that stuff, and she served it for hardly any money. And anybody who was hungry and came in and didn't have enough money, she gave it to them for free. And we loved going down there. Imagine this, 3 little girls, because our littlest sister, she was too young sometimes when we would do this, down at Grandma's restaurant, wrapped up in big white aprons, standing on a stool in the kitchen where there was this enormous sausage maker. And a sausage maker, in case you haven't seen one, it has a big tray, or these did, they had big trays on the top, big silver trays, and then there was a hole, and in the hole, you pushed all the sausage meat with this big metal pusher, and it went down a long tube, and where it came out in the shape of a sausage, you held the pig's intestines over that spout, and all the sausage meat got pushed down in there. And as we pushed, that was our job. My grandmother would be at the bottom, and when the sausage links got about that long, she would twist, and then the next one would come and she would twist, and we would make strings and strings of sausages. We loved it. We thought it was the most wonderful thing in the whole world. I bet you have those kinds of experiences that you shared with your family too. And wouldn't it be fun if we could all get together and share those experiences together? Because in my adult life as a storyteller, one of the things I've learned from people when I do storytelling workshops is that people's stories are always about those little special times. They're not about what a big car we had or what vacations we went on or what kind of clothes we wore or what kind of fancy things we had. No. People's stories are always about those times when they were connected to either their family, their relatives, their neighbors, somebody important in their life. And they're often told about times when people shared meals together. Because, eating together, sharing bread together is one of the most wonderful things. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I grew up, this little Italian-American girl, in a neighborhood with people who were Jewish and people who were German and people who were Irish. Everybody had big families in those days. Nobody had very much money, but we all were happy because we were all like each other. We didn't care. So for us, for instance, going to get pizza, actually, we hardly ever got pizza, but maybe once every 6 months my mother got pizza for us. Doing that was an enormous treat because we didn't get to do that very often. We all ate at home around the dining room table. And I had one brother. He was older than I was by 2 years. And he was like the prince in our family because in Italian families, the sons are everything, I have to say. And so he was the only son, so he was like the king. And we had to help him do things like we had to help him make his bed, and we had to make his lunch sometimes. And when we were kids, my room was, you had to go through his room to get to my room. And my sister, we shared the attic, and the attic stairs were in his room. For a while, he charged us a dime. Can you believe that? A dime to get through his room to go to the stairs. And we used to pay it till we got smart enough. And we told my mother, and she put a stop to that, which I thought was about time. So we had this kind of family life. We spent our summers down the Jersey Shore. Some of you may have heard about the Jersey Shore. We did not live on the beach. We had little cabins out in the woods about 20 minutes from the beach, surrounded by woods. Now, let me just tell you about our cabin. We thought it was like the Kennedy compound, but here was our compound. We had a little shack. It had 3 rooms, a kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. My parents had 1 bedroom, and we 5 kids slept in the other bedroom. There was no hot water, and there was no indoor plumbing. We all went down the path to the outhouse with my cousins. They had a shack across the field, same kind of deal. And we shared the outhouse. It was a double-seater. We always went together because you always were worried about spiders and things. Outhouses are still not my favorite place. And we took showers in the outside shower, cold water only, that was attached to my grandmother's house. Now, my grandmother and grandfather, these were my father's parents. They had a house that actually had a bathroom, a kitchen, a bedroom, and a dining room. We thought it was enormous. But we weren't allowed to go in and use that bathroom. There were too many grandkids, and the septic tank couldn't handle it. I don't know if you know about septic tanks, but there are these big tanks underground. When you flush your toilet, everything goes into there, and then the men come and they pump it out. It was amazing. We had never seen anything like it. And the days the men came to pump it out, oh, we loved that once a summer. It was so much fun, but let's not go there. It's kind of disgusting, really, when you think about it. So we spent all our time there in the summer, and we loved it. We had all these cousins, my father's family, in one street. It was a gravel road. Every single house, shack or otherwise, were cousins, aunts or uncles, and relatives. There were about 20 of us kids, cousins, and we just ran around wild through the woods, up and down the street, playing games. We had the Boys Hater Club, the Women's Hater Club. We had our cabins in the woods. We had our forts. We played apple games where we climbed the apple tree and threw apples at each other. We just loved it. It was really magical for kids, I thought. And we spent all our summers there till we got older. And then we spent our summers there when we got married. All my family got married. We used to put up tents because there weren't enough shacks for everybody, but we still had that 2-seater outhouse. A big event in our family's life at the shore, or the beach house as we called it, was every other year the men used to dig another hole for the outhouse a little further into the woods, and they would When they were digging the hole, they would take the dirt and they would pour it into the old outhouse through the two seats. And then when they were ready, all the men would get together and they would pick the outhouse up on, like, I don't know, some kind of planks, and they would carry it down the path and put it on the other side. And then they would fill in the original hole with dirt, cover it up, and plant grass over it. It was just amazing. I don't know if people have those kinds of experiences here in America anymore, but I mean, it was fascinating to a kid, endlessly fascinating to a kid. Anyway, I grew up, went to college, got married to a guy from England who I'd met over in England, and brought him back to America, married him in America, and he was, I think, totally attracted to my family because we were loud. There were lots of us. We laughed a lot. We had an enormous amount of food. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, but we always had plenty of food. And my husband, Bob, he grew up in England right after the war, and he remembers when there was rationing. And they never really had enough food. He remembers when his treat from his father, he and his two brothers, they had one Milky Way bar, and his father would cut it in 3 pieces once a week, and that was their big treat. So here he comes to our house, and we have jars of mayonnaise this big, and we have potato salad more than you can imagine, and we have ravioli, and we have sausages, and we have more food. At every meal, there's always more food than people could possibly eat. He had never seen that before. I think that's why he married me. But guess what? After 35 and a half years, we're still married. So something must have worked, you know what I mean? And we got married. We had 3 children. I was a nurse. I was a psychiatric nurse, and worked very part-time after the kids were born because we had decided that I would stay home with the kids if that was the best thing to do. So I worked like once a week as a nurse. And we gave up a lot of things for that, actually. Our friends who had where the wife and the husband both worked, and even when they had kids, they had a lot more than we did. But for us, it was really important that I was home with the kids. Now, I just was thinking, I stopped for a minute because I was thinking, it didn't mean that we didn't complain about what we didn't have. I don't want you to think we were saints, but we still made that decision, and I still stayed home with the kids because we thought that was important. But when I was about 38, so then our kids were, I think they were like maybe, they were 3 years apart. So when I was 38, one was 3, one was 6, one was 9. I started thinking to myself, is this what I really wanted? I think it was because I was approaching 40. I don't know if you guys have ever thought this. Is this what I really wanted? Is this what I thought my life was going to be like? Because at that time, you know, I had little kids over playing all the time. We had a house where our kids always had their friends over. Children, you know how, and I don't know if you know this maybe, but when kids are toddlers, they're always clinging to your knees. And, you know, if they have a runny nose, they're always wiping it on your pants. And you have spit up on your shoulder all the time. And you're eating fish sticks and homemade French fries because that's what kids like to eat. And you're up at night because they have teething problems or they have earaches or they have croup. And, you know, I used to think to myself, is this what I wanted when I got married? And actually, around that time, this is when I learned one of my big lessons in life. Around that time, I started thinking my husband had it easier than I did. Because after all, he went out to work every day. He got to eat lunch with nobody interrupting him and nobody wiping their noses on his pants. He got to go out to dinner sometimes with his work people. He got to actually focus on something all day long other than laundry, changing diapers, singing songs with your kids, making dinner, making grilled cheese for lunch, cleaning up the floor when they threw their food off the high chair. And I started to think that I kind of had a hard life. When you think about it, actually, I didn't. I had the blessing of being home with my kids and being there when my husband got home. But I was kind of a complainer in those days. And I'm not telling you that I'm not now, but I certainly was then. And one day, I remember this so clearly. The 3-year-old was on my lap, and I think he was probably sick, and I'd been up with him all night, and I was rocking him. And my husband was talking to me about his day, and he'd done something that I thought was really exciting from the point of view of a stay-at-home mom. And I said to him, I think I started complaining about it. And I said, you know, how come you get to have it so easy? And he looked at me, and he said this very wise thing, which was, he said, Anne-Louise, I can't make you happy. You have to make yourself happy. Now, I have to tell you, I was not at all happy to hear that from him. In fact, I was furious inside. And The inside part of me was raging. What does he mean? I have to make myself happy. He has everything. I'm home stuck with the kids. He can do whatever he wants. But then I started thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. I still didn't like it. Now, you would have thought I would have known this because after all, I was a psychiatric nurse. And before I did nursing and became a psychiatric nurse, I had gone to college and did a degree in psychology. So I'd studied all this kind of stuff. But it's always harder when you have to do it for yourself. You know, it's like the doctor. He can't treat himself. So even though I knew all these things over here for my patients and for other people, I might add, I didn't know them for myself. So things went on. Another 2 years passed. I turned 40, horrifyingly, though now that looks so young to me. At almost 59, 40 looks like, ooh, I'd like to be there again. But anyway, I turned 40 and I met a woman. She was, I think at that time, probably 65. And she and I were on a committee together to cite a new school. And she was the senior citizen on the committee, and I was the parent on the committee. And we got to be good friends, and we still are to this day. She's 90 now, I think, or just about 90. And one day I was complaining because now at this time, our kids were a bit older, but Bob was traveling all the time. And not only was he was traveling internationally. So he got to go to Singapore and Hong Kong and Australia and Europe and do all these fabulous things. And there I was home with the kids, thinking, once again, that I had a hard life. Not understanding what it was like for him out on the road. And someday I'm going to write a book about that. Spouses who travel for their jobs. So you can hear and we can all learn about how you can do better when you're in that situation. And I have to admit, we're still together. I told you that. So he forgave me for a lot of things I said during those years. But here I am complaining about how he's away and I'm home with these kids. And my friend Helen looked at me and she said, Anne-Louise, you do not have to be a victim. And that stopped me dead in my tracks. Bob stopped me once dead in my tracks. My friend Helen stopped me again. And I had to think about that. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, Anne-Louise, you can choose how you respond to this situation. You don't have to be a victim. And honestly, it was like a lightning bolt from the sky. Kind of hit me in the head. I said, you mean I don't have to choose to feel like this? She said, no. You actually can choose to feel however you want. This was the second lightning bolt in my life, the second life lesson, if you will, if you want to think about it like that. And I started down this path of finding out how I didn't have to be a victim, of finding out how I could choose to respond to things differently. I'm still on this path now. I think it's a never-ending path. I would like to think that it's going to be over sometime and I'll be done, but it's not like that. Just in case you're thinking you'll be done one day. We just keep going. It's all about the process, really. So I started on this path learning how I could think differently. And along the way, I've done a lot of different things. Something that I did that was really, really wonderfully effective was something called solutions. And now they call it emotional brain training. But I learned in that. And you can go online and look at that. It's EBT.org, emotionalbraintraining.org, and look at the whole program. It's out of California. Dr. Laurel Mellon is the researcher and the woman who put together this whole program. It's been around for quite a while. And what I learned is that your neural networks in your brain are connected in a certain way. And they get connected when you're children. Not right or not wrong, but by the experiences that happen to you in your life. And so you learn to respond in a certain way to experiences. And you keep doing that pattern. And as you do that again and again and again, that network gets stronger. Now, lots of us, myself included, we respond to things without even knowing that we're responding from these old patterns or these old expectations. We're responding to new events in that old way. And we don't even know that we actually can change those responses. We can uncross the neural networks that are causing us to act in unhelpful ways and reconnect new neural networks. It's amazing to me, really. And then we can change the way we respond to things. And we don't have to react, but we can act. Now, there's lots of research on that out there now. You can look up all kinds of things. This is just one way that I've done it. But really think about it. You don't have to act in the same way you always did before. That's another huge thing that I've learned. Now, one more thing, sort of in connection with this, is about forgiveness. This is something else that I've learned that really, for me, has made a huge difference and really changed me, I think. And again, I want to tell you, I'm not perfect at any of this. I'm continuing to learn it, and I continually fall back to my old ways. But here's the thing. Once you have the awareness of what you're doing, you may lose that for a second, for an hour, for a day, but you always are aware of it in the end, and you can't go back to that old way. You just can't, because now you know you don't have to be like that. So for instance, here's an example. You're having a disagreement with your husband or your wife. Okay. So you start saying things from your old patterns. So maybe when they say something that you've done something wrong, that triggers some old patterns in you about maybe when your father used to tell you did something wrong, and you get angry right away. So you respond from that place, but you don't know it. You're sort of so in the moment you don't know it. And you start saying maybe not very nice things to your husband because you're feeling so angry and hurt inside. Okay, the old you would have maybe kept going down that path because you weren't aware that's how you were acting. But the new you, because you have this awareness now, and you've been working on changing your neural networks, the new you can stop and say, uh-oh, sweetheart, I didn't mean that. I'm really sorry. Can we stop and start again? And I have to tell you, that changes everything. And forgiveness, I sort of got off the topic for a little bit. But hopefully your spouse will forgive you for what you say, and you will forgive your spouse for what you say. But forgiveness is something that's really important, and it's at a deeper level than I could ever have imagined before. Because I'm not talking about like the forgiveness that maybe you hear people preaching, perhaps kind of glibly in churches. Though I'm not saying churches don't know the other kind of forgiveness, but it's not that. It's not just saying, hey, I'm sorry. It's a very much of a deeper thing. When you've been hurt so badly you think you'll never recover, how do you forgive the person for that? How do you work on that inside? Because forgiveness, here's what I learned. Forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness was for me. Because when you forgive somebody at that really deep level, and you have to keep doing it again and again and again until finally it sort of sticks. When you forgive somebody in that place, it's healing for you. It's not just healing for them. And you free them, actually, to move on as well. So you give that person a huge gift, and you give yourself a huge gift. So if you're thinking, wait a minute, why should I forgive somebody who was really nasty to me or whatever, or somebody who did something really terrible to me? If you think about it from this perspective, it's going to make you better, because when you live with that buried anger inside, it never goes away, and it affects everything you do from then on. Now, I know our society would rather teach us it's better to be right than to forgive, and that revenge is better than forgiveness. But you know what? That's not truth. That's sort of acting from our ego, but that's not what makes a difference. I'm telling you this true. And if you want to talk about it, call me up. We can talk about it on the telephone. You work to forgive from this deep level, and it changes your life. And you know what? I don't know if you can find audacious joy without finding forgiveness. Now I am a person who works on those things all the time, and I fall back, but I keep working on them. And in that process, by the way, our kids grew up, and I became a storyteller, a singer, a performing artist, a speaker, and an author. Things that I never really thought about when I was younger. Isn't that amazing? And I'll tell you the story about how I did that one day. But right now I want to tell you this. I have an alter ego who also performs with me. And I found her because I said to myself, there's something stopping me in my speaking life and my performing life. I wonder what it is. And then I realized that when I was a girl, my father used to say, don't be like your great aunts because they were very noisy and loud and flamboyant. And remember, my father was from the northern Italian side of the family, the quiet side of the family. And he used to say that to we girls whenever we got too noisy, loud, or flamboyant. And I thought to myself, this is stopping me. I'm afraid to be too lousy, to be too loud, noisy, and flamboyant. And so I found that inside me, I had an alter ego, Aunt Lena. And I'm going to go get her right now and bring her back, and she's going to talk to you. So hold on for a second and don't go away. Hi, dolls. I'm Anne-Louise's great Aunt Lena. She calls me her alter ego, but I call her my alter ego. You know what I mean? Now, I'm just checking the camera to make sure I'm looking good. I want to make sure you get all my special features, my beautiful lips, my beautiful glasses. It's okay? It's good? Okay. So now we're going to talk. Well, so many things I have to tell you. So many more things than Anne-Louise's knows because I'm old and I've been around for a long time. The first thing I want to tell you is, here's the thing about me. Well, we came from Italy when I was a very, very, very little girl, probably only like 1 year old. And then we lived in northern Jersey and New York City. That's all you really need to know about me. I had 5 sisters, a mother and a father. That's enough is enough. I'm not going to tell you anything else about me. But I do want to tell you one thing that Anne-Louise forgot to tell you. You may have been saying to yourself, how did she go from being a nurse to being a singer and a storyteller and a performer and a speaker and an author? You may want to know that, and I'm going to tell you how. When she was almost 40, she told you something about being almost 40. Besides her husband, Bob, that limey guy, telling her that she had to make her own happiness, she was at the doctor's office one day with those 3 little darling children, and she's reading a magazine, and in the magazine it says, if you want to know how to have a passionate life and do something you're passionate about, think about what you wanted to do when you were a little girl. But just one sec, before I finish the story, I got to refresh my lipstick. I got my pocketbook right here in my lipstick. Let me just do it because it's not good for a girl to be too much without her red, you know what I mean? So I'll just put it on, and you can tell me if I got it on right, okay? Is it good, doll? Is it on my teeth? Huh? I'll wash it off. Huh? Okay, better? Okay, thanks, dolls. Let me know if I have to refresh again. Anyway, so she's reading this article, and she thinks to herself, what did she always want to be when she was little? Well, she wanted to have a horse. That wasn't going to happen in Hoboken, New Jersey. And maybe she can get that when she gets older. Who knows? But she always wanted to be a singer because her mother and father used to take her across the George Washington Bridge to New York City to see all the Broadway shows. And she particularly loved The Sound of Music and My Fair Lady. She thought she should be in those shows. Well, that did not happen for her, I can tell you that. But when she was 39, she thought, I always wanted to be a singer. And do you know what? I kid you not, a year later, and by the way, she always sang with her patients at the hospital. She would bring a guitar, she would play the piano, she sang with her kids, she sang with the neighborhood kids. Once she did a church choir, she wasn't very good at that, but the kids loved it. The music was just, neither here nor there, comme ci, comme ça. But anyway, she said she wanted to be a singer, and a year later, somebody calls her and says, look, I'm going to put on a program for the kids in the summer. We're going to have arts and crafts and music. Would you come and do the music part? So, Anne-Louise's first job as a singer for $25 every morning for 5 mornings a week. She went $25 a week. Great pay, huh? And for a half hour, she sang with all the little kids with her guitar. That's how she started on her way to fame and fortune. Can you believe? Okay, but that's neither here nor there. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Okay, I never went to college. I never went to high school. In those days, girls didn't go to high school. I had 3 husbands. They died. But that's okay because I'm looking for another husband right now. If any of you out there are interested, just give me a little call on the telephone. I'm very up to date. I even have a website and an email. You could email me. I'm on Facebook, can you believe? And I tweet, whatever the heck that means. Get in touch with me if you're interested in interviewing because now I'm looking for love. Because here's how it goes in my family. You marry first time for money, second time for love. Because then you have the money to do what you want with the one you love. You know what I mean? Now, I had to marry 3 times for money because the first 3 didn't have much money. But now I got enough to keep going, so I'm looking for love. So if you're interested, once again, give me a call and we'll talk about it on the telephone. If you're married, don't worry. Your wife and I can work it out. I'm not fussy about those kind of things. So anyway, I never went to high school or college, but I went back to community college when I was 72 years old because I wanted to learn what the kids were learning. And what I found out was they didn't know what I knew because I just lived a long time and I knew stuff. So here's something I know. First of all, always wear your hat. Protects your head, makes you look nice. Always wear your, in fact, let me adjust that head a little forward. Always wear your glasses because you want to protect your eyes. And aren't these nice glasses? People always comment on my glasses, and I make friends with my glasses because people like them. Always wear your gloves. Keeps your skin looking young. Now, your pocketbook. I have this here pocketbook put together with duct tape because I'm a very economical person. That's how I save my money. And duct tape, I think, gives it a nice little look. So you always got to have your pocketbook. And shoes. You can't see my feet in this video, but I'm going to show you my shoes so you can see how nice they are. You always got to have nice shoes. I got my little clips on there to make them look fancy because a lady always looks nice with her fancy shoes. And, of course, right over here, I have my fox. Now, I didn't put it on because it's a little hot in the studio, but here's my little fox shawl, and I put it on when I want to look really special, and it gives me just that little edge. You know what I mean? Anyway, back to important things. Okay, something I learned. They said, talk about things you learned, so I'm going to talk about something I learned besides the husband thing. Okay, first of all, in this life, you got to make your own gravy. Now, you may think gravy is like brown gravy for roast beef or that sort of white gravy you put on biscuits out in the West where Anne-Louise lives now. So, you know, you just put that white gravy with like bacon and stuff and you put it over those biscuits. It's a killer. Eat one of those and your heart's going to clog right up. You know what I mean? Tastes good though. But no, I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about red gravy for spaghetti. We had red gravy for spaghetti. We had brown gravy for meat. So when you were making gravy, you'd say, I'm making red gravy today. But you got to make your own gravy to be happy in this life. Now, when I was a young girl, I didn't know what my grandmother was talking about when she said, you got to make your own gravy. I thought she just meant the gravy. But kind of like when Anne-Louise's husband said to her, Anne-Louise, you got to make your own happiness. I figured out when I was older that making gravy is really about making your own happiness and making your own joy. And here's something to know. If you don't make your own gravy, you got no respect for yourself. You know what I mean? Oofa. And if you got no respect for yourself, how can you have respect for somebody else or anybody else? And if you don't got respect for yourself or anybody else, is life worth living? I don't think so. Now, you can make your own gravy in lots of different ways, and I even wrote a song about it, but I just want to show you one thing. Think this is a wonderful thing. I actually wrote a book that has the gravy recipe in it. Can you believe I wrote a book? It's called Aunt Lena's Cucina. That means my kitchen. Now, I know I'm really not supposed to be doing advertising. I'm just telling you about myself, but I just think it's such a cute book. I have to show it to you. And it has pictures of me when I was young and pictures of me now, very fashionable, and all kinds of great recipes for you to cook at home. Because cooking at home is part of making your own gravy and making yourselves happy, because too many people now, they don't do no cooking at home. They don't sit around the kitchen table at night together like a family and hear about each other's day. No, they buy fast food, they go out for food, they let their kids watch TV at dinner time instead of sitting around the table. This is a big no. You want to sit around the table with your kids and your husband so everybody can talk about their day and eat nice food together. And when you're cooking nice food, it's love for your family and your friends. Nothing more, nothing less. And if you don't got love, what do you got? So making your own gravy is about cooking. It's about finding your own joy. It's about doing things to make yourself feel better. It's about telling yourself good thoughts in your brains. You know, Anne-Louise talked about that neural network thing. Your brain's all screwed up. That's how we would have said it in the old days. Your brain's all mixed up and you sort of unmix it up. Making gravy is about unmixing up your brain. Now, I wrote a little song about this. You might want to hear it because one of the things they found out with the brain research is that you got to unscrew up those neural networks or whatever they call those things in there, you got to unconnect them and then connect them to something else. So you got to tell yourself new words or new stories about how things are to reconnect them. So I'm going to teach you this little song. It's called You Gotta Make Your Own Gravy. Can you believe it? I wrote it all myself in like 1 minute. I don't know what songwriters make such a big deal about writing songs. They think it takes so long. They got to find instruments. They got to do this. They can't think of the words. I wrote the song. In fact, this song has the entire wisdom of the world in one sentence. The song is actually only one sentence long. But here's the good thing about it. You can add more sentences of your own, and you can make it up all day long so you can feel good. So here's how it goes. Now, if I could stand up, I would, but I can't. So I'm going to have to do it sitting down. It goes like this. And you got to snap your fingers, and you don't even need an instrument. It goes like this. A little saucy, you know what I mean? Sauce, gravy, all goes together. I love that. You got to make your own gravy. You got to make your own gravy. You got to make your own gravy. 'Cause ain't nobody gonna do it for you. Now that is the hard fact of life. Nobody is gonna do it for you. You gotta do it yourself. I have to admit, I didn't like that very much when I heard it. Because don't we all want other people to do it for us? Don't we want everybody to make it better for us so we don't have to do it ourselves? Yes, usually we do. But the truth is, when you do that, you give away your power to somebody else. You say, it's their fault, not my fault. You say, they made me do it, so I can't do it. But that's not the truth. The truth is, you can do it for yourself. And you got to, if you want to have an audaciously joyful life. Don't you love that word, audacious? I love that word. It's like courageous or fearless. You want to have a courageously, fearlessly joyful life. It's all there is. So let's do the song again. And we can put more things in there. It could be like this. You gotta make your own gravy. You gotta make your own gravy. You gotta make your own gravy. 'Cause ain't nobody gonna do it for you. Doesn't that sound so great? Can't you hear it with a big orchestra behind it? I think the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and I could do this song together. That thought just came into my head. And actually, I'm here in Salt Lake City, so maybe I'll go visit with those guys and talk to the choir director. But anyway, that's another little story. I keep getting sidetracked. Okay, you're gonna sing your own song. You're gonna sing your own song. You're gonna sing your own song. 'Cause ain't nobody gonna do it for you. You're gonna make your own joy. You're gonna make your own joy. You're gonna make your own joy. 'Cause ain't nobody gonna do it for you. Now you can sing that all day long and put in whatever you want there. And then it's gonna reconnect those things in your head so that you're knowing you gotta make your own gravy. It's just as easy sometimes as singing a song, isn't it? And once you learn this song, it's never going to go out of your head. You're going to be going to sleep with this song. You're going to be waking up with this song. You're going to be saying, I wish she hadn't taught me that song because I can't get it out of my head. But it's a good song. You know what I mean? So that's one little thing, making your own gravy. And some other time we can talk more about that. But the other thing I got to tell you about is you got to make nice with people even if they're not your family. That's a really big thing. That's something that I learned. They said, talk about life lessons. That's a life lesson I learned. Because when we grew up, we only made nice with our family. You know what I mean, make nice, of course. And we only made nice with our family. Everybody else was like them. You know what I mean? You might know what I mean. If they don't go to the same church as us, they're them. If they don't come from the same country as us, they're them. In our case in Italy, if they don't come from the same region as us, they're them. And the people up there look down on the them down there, look down on the them down there, look down on the them down there. And this is not a good way to live. It does not make for joy or happiness, even though many people think that that is the right thing to do. I'm telling you, it's the wrong thing to do. Now, even little kids, they don't know this. You know how they go in line, they're 5 years old, and they say, oh, I don't want to stand next to you. You're not my best friend. They don't know that they can be nice to that kid behind them, even if they're not best friends, because nobody tells them that. They may be too little developmentally. Don't you know how I love all this fancy stuff? Developmentally, they may be too little to know that. But you can tell them the words, so by the time they're your age, they're going to remember that. You can make nice. You can be nice even if it's not your best friend. You can sit next to them even if they're not your best friend. Excuse me for 1 second. Do I have to reapply? I'm feeling a little pale. Let me just put a little more on. The cameraman is not giving me any indication about how my lipstick is doing, so I'm going to have to just go for it myself. Okay. He said it's good. Is that my teeth, though? I can't tell. Okay, better. Okay, sorry. We never want to have dry lips. So anyway, back to being nice. So you got to make nice with people even if you don't like them. And that's kind of a hard thing to do, but there's lots of ways you can learn to do that. It just takes a little practice, you know what I mean? and then you can learn. So that's something else I want you to remember. Now, we can talk about this all more in depth at another time, but I just want to give you some little tips right now. So you got to make your own gravy, okay? You got to make nice to people even if they're not your family. What else you got to do? You got to tell yourself a new story. Like, what's that story you're telling yourself? You could call all of this the spice rack of life. And these are all the things that are on the spice rack of life. Don't you like that? I just thought it up. I think that could be the name of my new book, The Spice Rack of Life. Anyway, where was I? Changing your story. Yeah. You want to change the words you tell yourself. Change the story you tell yourself. Like, do you tell yourself a story about your neighbor that your neighbor doesn't really like you and is not very nice because they let their dog pee on your grass? Excuse me for that expression, but anyway, that happens to us all the time. And we used to say, that neighbor doesn't like us, and that neighbor is not a very nice person because they let their dog do this. What are they thinking? And then our grass would turn yellow. Now, I kid you not. Are there not more important things in life to think about than whether your grass is a little bit yellow at the edge? Consider the state of the world. But these are the kind of things that we all get caught up with, don't we? So instead of going to talk to your neighbor, what do? You complain, 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 complain about how your neighbor's not nice. By the time you see your neighbor again, you can barely speak to them. Supposing you changed your story about that neighbor. Supposing you said, they're letting their dog out. They don't know their dog is coming to my grass. And they're letting their dog out by itself because they're sick. And they can't walk the dog. That could be true, couldn't it? Who knows? So instead of saying mean things about them and being mad at them, I'll go over and knock on their door and see just how they're doing. Or just the how they're doing, as we would say. And if they're doing fine, I'll just say to them, do you know that your dog is going on my grass and it's turning yellow? Would you mind not letting him? And I bet you almost 99% of the time they're going to say, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that was happening. I won't let the dog do that again. Now that's a really easy example, isn't it? But this is what we do with all kinds of things in our life. And we make ourselves miserable. We make ourselves feel terrible because we make ourselves feel like everybody is against us and we're the victim. And in fact, it's not true. Take my word for it. I got the family. I know the truth. So these are just a few little things that I have learned on my life journey. And the lipstick, though. Remember about the lipstick. Put it on all day long. You want to keep your lips nice and moist. Now, here's the thing. I could talk to you for a long time. I could sing you some more song, but I'm going to have to go out and make some ravioli with a little gravy. So I'll just sing you the song one more time so you can sing it by yourselves and you'll never get it out of your head. Now, if you're at home watching this, why don't you sing along with me? It's going to make you feel so good because singing raises the endorphin levels in your brain and makes you feel fabulous. Another little tip I learned along the way. Here we go. You gotta make your own gravy. You gotta make your own gravy. You gotta make your own gravy. 'Cause ain't nobody gonna do it for you. Hear that whole Mormon Tabernacle Choir behind me singing in their beautiful voices with the orchestra playing too. All together, here we go. Just imagine it. You gotta make your own gravy. You gotta make your own gravy. You gotta make, your own gravy. 'Cause ain't nobody gonna do it for you. Ciao, Bella.